ARES University. Today we will be discussing nonverbal cues. These are commonly referred to as pre-incident indicators, but these are also attributes that lead up to violence. And the better that you understand these, the better likelihood you have of defending yourself at the appropriate distance or with the appropriate tactics. We'll start off today discussing these different areas that constitute nonverbal cues. The first that we'll talk about is proximity. Now, proximity is the relationship of space between you and the threat. Kinetics, which would be the time that is between you and the threat as far as how quickly someone can cover the distance, whether it be a slow approach or all-out sprint towards you. You need to calculate time and space. This proxemics is a tool that's valuable and to understand in threat management. The next is vocalics. Now, vocalics is how we say the words we say. It happens to involve speed, tone, pitch, the volume of the words that are being spoken. It's not necessarily means what you're saying, it's how you're delivering it. The next we'll look at is haptics. Haptics is the sense of touch. If you've ever heard the phrase, he has the upper hand, it actually came from how people would shake hands and greet each other. Usually when the individual has a dominance of sorts, meaning that they are in their house and it's their house, and you walk in and you shake hands, it's typical that the individual that owns the house usually has their hand on top like this, not a traditional shake. That's called the upper hand. That's just an example of a haptic. Also, haptics could be, whether you're touching somebody gently or pushing them harder. You don't really have to say anything. You understand the message that's being sent. One could be of empathy or gratitude. Another could be of a form of aggression or to clear space. So haptics is an important attribute to have. Later on in our lesson plan, you'll understand that haptics is really, really important as far as close combat fighting goes. Next, we'll talk about kinesics. This is the movement of the body, or the study of the movement of the body. It's important to understand this segment because when an individual shifts their body weight or repositions their hands or points with misdirection or things like that, that's kinesics at work. It's how the body moves and your interpretation of it. Now, if you're new to this type of training, a lot of times when we get into our confrontational invocation training, where we get pretty contagious with our words and our actions, it's designed to release some adrenaline into the body. It's pretty easy to get fixated upon the event, or in this case the threat, as they present themselves to you, but not really mindful so much of their body shift or how they turn their head or how they get their strong side back or put their hands in their pocket. It's easy to lose sight of the totality of the event. So in kinesics training, our goal is to see everything. Now, the closer in the threat is, you are either ambushed or you fail to recognize or even see a potential threat coming to you. Again, this comes back to proxemics. But if someone's really close to you, it's hard to get a gauge of their whole body. If you can, you want to bring your hands up and step back and see what's this all about, or whatever the case is. And finally, we have oculesics, which is the study of eye motion. Now, if you've ever been pulled over by a police officer or been approached and this is your everyday carry, sunglasses, the police officer or person in charge is going to ask you to kindly remove your glasses. They're not trying to be pricks about it, but what they need to see is your eye motion. You know, if you have this rapid glazing or grazing vision or motion rather going on about you, then it kind of gives you some indication that the person may be nervous, looking for a way out, looking for an ally, or looking to distract. So eye motion is very important. So those comprise of the main components of nonverbal cues. We have proxemics, vocalics, haptics, chronemics, which is time. We have oculesics and kinesics. So I know I said them in a backwards order than I delivered them, but confusion sometimes is a good teacher as well. So I hope you enjoy this segment and stay tuned for the next. Find the stop button. There we go. Okay, so let's delve into each one of these nonverbal cues into a little bit deeper as far as defining them for what they are. Proxemics, we talked about, is the distance or the distance relationship between a group of people and an individual or parties. It's just a separation distance between two entities. Proxemics is typically broken into 4 different forms or 4 different relationships. One being public. A public relationship would be, maybe I see a group of people that are just outside of almost the yelling range, where I can see them but I can't really make out what they're doing. It's kind of like that blurred vision. You really can't see everything. You can maybe focus in on one thing, but everything else goes blurry. The next would be social. Now, a social environment, relationship to proximity, would be if I'm standing in front of you and there's a class of people there. You're basically in my social environment, where I can see and pick up on individual motions, maybe not as clearly as I would like to, but if someone raised their hand in class, it's something that you could identify quickly and you could address that question. The next would be personal space. Now, personal space is usually defined as if my arm is out at full range and I can touch you, 18 to 36 inches away from my body. That's my personal space. You back up, you're in my personal space. It's sometimes something that you feel like saying, or you actually do say it when the person gets too close to you. That's the space we were talking about earlier, where chronemics really plays an important part of how quickly distance can be covered. The further away, public, you can readily identify it. You can form an action plan. Social, you can identify it and form an action plan, but there's going to be a little bit more cortisol and adrenaline pumped into the bloodstream through the body. And when you get to the personal space, you kind of have that heavy breathing going on at this point, where you're in that fight or flight feeling, to the point that you want to clear space. I mean, you almost want to back up. That's the feeling that you get. Now, if you're not trained in recognizing those cues, you miss out all those opportunities. By the time the person gets here, you're really under a lot more stress than you could have otherwise been in. And finally, the last is the intimate space. Typically, this is reserved for hugging or lovemaking, play wrestling, grappling, those types of things. It's intimate. That's you're beyond the personal, because now you can just physically touch the person all over, even close up. So that's a space that we talked about that that will help us identify things more through the sense of touch or haptics versus the sense of vision and proximity of that. So let's look at the nonverbal cues of vocalics and how they could sway an individual to action or inaction. Part of training in self-defense or in combatives in general is to enter the assailant or the defendant victim's psychology, and this is usually done by the delivery of words, not necessarily like, you know, back up. It would be more like back up. It would have some influence in the motives of the words being said. If I was to approach you with my teeth clenched and like, you know, sort of back up like this here, it's a concealment of intent. And again, it's important to understand that speed and tone and pitch and volume all are relative to the act of violence. If it's a slow perpetration of violence, meaning that there's an escalation. Commonly too is you'll see an individual who, you know, we call like a status seeking show. It's one of Roy Miller's terms. And what this is, you know, you have one individual who's trying to impress a group. You know, they're like the dominant alpha male, and they can say things louder to get influence and buy-in, or they could say things quieter to kind of give them an out. You know, if I'm with a big group of people and I say, you know, you need to back up, you know, motherfucker, whatever, and then I get close to you and I get your intimate personal space, like, hey man, you better back up, I'll knock you out, and they whisper it to you. It's like a way of communicating to you, hey man, you know, like, make me look good, walk away from this, I don't really want to fight. So those kind of interpretations need to be addressed and dealt with. Okay, so let's look at the subject matter of haptics, the sense of touch. The closer in you get, the more they can reach and touch you. Persuasion is usually conveyed as how you say the words, and if you're able to touch the person, that also conveys a dominant presence. Haptics comes into really a dynamic position when you're so close to the person that you both can hug. Let's just say you're in a stand-in clinch or stand-in grappling position. When you develop tactile sensitivity, which is part of haptics, you're able to feel the energy, feel the direction or misdirection or redirection that's actually happening before you could visually pick up on it. You know, the hand's quicker than the eye. Well, that holds true with body emotion as well. If I'm able to secure a grip, you know, with your handshake, and I'll hold it for a longer time, that haptical message is being delivered. You know, hey, I'm not done talking with you, or I'm trying to be a smart ass and, you know, make sure that you understand that I'm the person in charge. Or if I shake your hand and I pull you in closely, it may be the, you know, the whisper in the ear, or maybe even, you know, hit you with a knife from the other hand. So understanding that level of communication is very important. With a group of people, you know, haptics comes into play equally if you're ambushed or more than one person is attacking you. Again, you can't really see things as quickly as you're able to respond to them haptically. Again, tactile sensitivity is everything when it comes to that type of training. Now, I like to train sometimes with my eyes closed, just so I can hone in on that sensitivity. Also, I like to protect my eyes against incidental, you know, finger jabs, or, you know, when we're doing vortex training and those types of things. You know, I try to take again, all the precautions I can, even in a training environment, to minimize risk or injury to myself. Um, so that's a good definition of haptics. It's just the ability to feel, sense, touch, control, um, through expression of grip, through expression of position. Those are that would pretty much cover haptics for you. Okay, let's carry on with the nonverbal cues. This one we will address kinesics, or the study of movement, body. It's again, it's equally as important as the other ones. Each one has their level of importance as the event is unfolding. But kinesics is something that you can pick up usually during the proxemic range. They don't have to really necessarily be in a range where they could whisper to you or talk to you in a normal volume like I am right now, but it's how they approach you and what they do once they've gained access to your personal space. It's a very challenging skill set to develop, because when you're adrenalized, you convert all your motor skills usually over to gross motor motions. Not gross like, oh, that's gross, like throw up, but gross as far as the inability to do fine motor mechanics. You know, cutting a steak with a fork would be a fine motor skill. Taking a knife and stabbing your steak would be more of a gross motor skill set. Plus, it makes you look crazy. The kinesics, it involves a lot of things, and one of the things that I like to discuss and teach is deceptive kinesics, is the ability to distract the person in front of you. Now, from my position now, I'm going to play as the predator or the attacker, and you're just going to be the good guy. If I was to, you know, move my hand in a certain way, it may be enough to stimulate you just to follow my hand because you're in a heightened state of arousal at that point. Where if we're just having a conversation, you may or may not track my hand. But in a heightened state of arousal, it's easier to manipulate an individual through deception. So I'm using deceptive body motion, deceptive kinesics. Again, you know, if you understand these things when they present themselves to you, you're more able to defend yourself against it. You don't have to track people. Now, as from the victim or the good guy's perspective, when you're training in the ARES program, you realize that you can play the motives or the mechanics of the bad guy while being the good guy. Because again, if a person selected you, they selected you for a reason. Typically because they thought you were an easy, approachable subject, and they chose you as a soft target. Probably, maybe because of opportunity. You know, maybe you're just isolated and there's no bystanders around, or you know, you rolled your shoulders forward and you were walking with a weird gait, and you know, you had your head down and your cell phone. Again, those are all soft targets. Target analysis we'll get into. But when a person, the good guy, he can also use the deception as a motivator to get the attacker, the bad guy, to look away. Again, when you recognize the threat and you're both engaged mano a mano, man against man, he's also, unless he's a psychopath, is adrenalized as well. So some visualization training that I would recommend is have a pre-planned game plan in case you need to misdirect. If I'm approached by a person of you know, of a large guy or a couple of guys, you know, I'm gonna say, hey man, and I'll look in another direction or move my hand in that direction to hopefully influence them to react to it. Or if I say, hey police officer, you know, how's it going, buddy? Something like that. Or you know, even disguising through you know, through your words, you know, are you guys the undercover police officers that I'm here to meet? And use some body language with that. That's deception um, through through manipulation of words and strategy, but it's also kinetically driven. Um, Kinetics also involves things like scratching your, you know, facial grooming. I do this a lot. It's just a habit. Um, you know, it's rubbing your eye. These things like this here are methods to distract or to size a person up. So if you see an individual, you know, with their arms crossed one over the other like this, and I'm doing this to you, I may be totally absorbing what you're saying, and I appreciate that, or I may be like, dude, I don't give a fuck what you're saying. I ain't listening to you. So those are two challenges, but usually associated with that, you know, I hear what you're saying, you know, I'm concerned, or I don't give a fuck what you're saying, and I'm like this here, and I'm looking at you like, I'm fucking back up, and this is a different kinetic motion versus like, yeah, I can see that. So there's other things that go along with that, the raising of the eyebrows, you know, the tightening of the lips, the motive or the operation of the other hand, you know, my supported grip on the elbow and under my arm. These are different things that you'll be able to pick up on through kinesics. Stepping back with your strong side forward, again, it should trigger, you know, this guy's getting ready, looks like he's getting ready to hit me. And those are things. If he reaches in his pocket or reaches behind his back, he's doing this out of maybe he's drawing a weapon or knife. Maybe he's legitimately, you know, looking for his keys. You have to understand that from the victim's, from the good guy's perspective, your interpretation of the bad guy is important. But from the good guy too, there's a way of manipulating your body, hands in pocket, disguise and things that's gonna, you know, save your butt as you try to exit the conflict. Kinetics would also could involve, you know, parts of the oculesics of the eyes because it is movement. So if I have that big stare, you know, you're like, crap, you know, I'm looking through you because I don't hear you, or I'm trying to psych you out, flashing eyes back and forth, up and down, looking around, doing, you know, looking behind me, see if I have any buy-in from any allies, or if I have any witnesses. Those are the types of things you want to look for. Now, kinesics rather, also, if I'm walking towards the entry of a store and I see a person there at the door, and it's kind of like a red flag automatically. You know, this guy's gonna freaking ask me for money, or he's gonna ask me for something. And when you have that gut feeling, we call it intuition, but it's also just out of just routine. Okay, you expect that nowadays. So before he even says anything to you, study how that approach or how that first word is said. There's usually a pre-contact indicator or pre-incident indicator that exposes itself before that. In training, it's important to do that as well, because in a controlled training environment, we look at things like, I know what you're going to do because we're training, and nothing's really nothing's like surprises you, because you're predisposed to the event before it even happens through just basically you know, being taught the tactic. But in your training class, you know, it's good sometimes to have the element of surprise and to approach people differently and then challenge them. You know, what was it that I did that was a red flag? And a lot of times you get, well, I don't know, you just walked up towards me. Yeah, but what was the red flag? You know, be more observant. A lot of people, you know, were caught in the moment of the actual time, like right now, I'm talking to you, but and you're listening to me. Can you remember what you did 10 minutes ago? Can you remember what you did a day ago? Can you remember what shirt you wore yesterday? Those would be like triggers to help you recall information after the event if you've been attacked. But staying on topic of kinesics, I really want you to understand that it's motion. You know, it's me rubbing my lips. Maybe I'm salivating too much because I feel that energy just coming up inside of me, like I'm going to knock you out. Kinesics also has somewhat to do with how I position myself for counterattacks and that stuff as well. So just movement in general is what we would call kinesics. So thank you for watching this module 1.2 on nonverbal cues. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me. I'm here to answer those questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll find somebody that does. Have a good one. So let's look at this individual here. What nonverbal cues do you see? Take a real close look. I'll try to find out what her dominant side is. What type of or interest do you think she has? And what message is she sending with her facial expression? Here we have an example of an individual not aware of their environment while someone else is checking them out. Here we have Cassie again, being more involved in her phone than her surroundings. I walk by, and because I know it's a 2-level parking garage, I walk by the elevator and I rendezvous with her at the top of the elevator at her car. Finally, the predator gets his reward. Again, she was clueless of her environment, condition white. By the time she was to respond to it, she went immediately into condition red or possibly black, active state of denial. And the attacker here can have his way with robbing her of her money, taking her keys, or taking the subject.